Greetings. I'm Brian Tuskin, your host. Welcome to Cop to Corporate. Today we have Ellen Kirschman, who's a working police psychologist and also an author. And we have her on Cop to Corporate because I wanted to get her perspective on police transition, and just hear from a professional in the field. Welcome, Ellen, to the Cop to Corporate show.
Very happy to be here, Brian.
So tell me a little about yourself and your connection to policing, and what are you doing today to help police officers?
So I've been a police and public safety psychologist for 4 decades. Before, you can't see me, but I did it before I had any gray hair, and now I have a head full of gray hair. Um, and I've done any number of things. My work, I'm an independent consultant, so I don't work for any other agency. And my work has taken me to, I think, 22 states and 4 different countries. I do a lot of workshops. My interest has largely been police families and how police work spills over to the family, and how damaging it can be unless both the officer and the officer's spouse or significant other are aware of these things and work together to prevent them. I also, as you pointed out, I'm an author. My first book is called I Love a Cop, What Police Families Need to Know. As I realized that we train cops up one wall and down the other all the time and never train their families about what to expect, what they can control, what they can't control, and how to sort of keep that boundary around the family so that the work doesn't contaminate absolutely everything. After that, I wrote a book called I Love a Firefighter, What the Family Needs to Know. Now, in the interest of self-disclosure, I have to tell you that I am not married to a cop. Never had a date with a cop. That's been my profession. My brother was a firefighter, a volunteer firefighter, so I do have that connection. But I went out and did a lot of interviews with families, so there's tons of stories and tips and things in these books. And then after those 2 books, it just became clear that one of the things that in the first responder culture, it's really hard to reach out for help. And when you finally do reach out for help, you get a therapist who doesn't understand what you do, why you do it, or the culture that you work in, there can be some really awful mistakes made. So with 2 colleagues, Joel Fay and Mark Kamina, both of them are psychologists and retired cops, we wrote a 3rd book called Counseling Cops, What Clinicians Need to Know, hoping to inform clinicians who may see 1 or 2 cops in their entire careers, what these jobs are like and how they affect the people and the wear and tear that comes as a result. And then I sort of got tired of reality, and I thought, man, it's got to be easier to make this stuff up. So I started writing mysteries, and my protagonist, Dot Meyerhoff, it's the Dot Meyerhoff Mysteries, is like myself, a police psychologist, only she's a lot younger, and she takes risks with her job that I would have lost my license for doing. So she actually should be counseling cops all the time, not solving crimes, but you can't hold this woman back.
Well, that is quite a career. Thank you for what you do for the men and women in blue. If there are any themes that you found out all these years in talking to police families and trying to bridge the gap of what cops do, it's super hard. We don't want to talk about it. We come home, we have a hard day, we just bottle it inside. Uh, in your reviews and analysis and assessments, what are the themes that you could maybe share and help police families understand their loved ones that wear the uniform?
Well, there's sort of tons of things that I could say. You brought up the issue of communication. This is the way we are in our culture. Women tend to be the ones that take care of relationships. And And it's really important to understand that a good, solid, enduring, and happy marriage has to have the input from both people. And that, to use the example that you gave of, don't want to talk about this when I get home, we think that the officer has to really change how they proceed with communication. I always tell families, talk about how you want to communicate before the big one happens, right? Where do you want to communicate? What do you want to hear about? Some families say, you can tell me absolutely anything that's happened to you in your work, except something that when a child got hurt. We also say to the officers themselves, this is not a black and white situation. It's not tell everything or tell nothing. Your family really probably isn't interested in where you found the finger on the railroad tracks and the head in the tree 10 yards down the road. What they want to know is, when you walk in the house with that face on, did you have a bad day at work, or are you mad at us? And it's really only civil and polite and kind to say to your family, I saw something today I hoped never to see. What I really would need from you guys now is about 20 minutes to let me go outside and jog around a block. I really don't want to talk about this because I've talked about it at work all afternoon or all evening. But I just want you to know that I'm so happy to see you guys, and you mean the world to me. So to just kind of explain what's going on without all the details. And whenever a cop says to me, listen, I don't take my job home, they're actually lying to themselves. Your job follows you at home, no matter what you think or what you'd like to think. And your family is reading you from the minute you walk in the door. So it isn't fair not to let them know what's going on with you. And as I said, it doesn't have to be every last gory detail.
So, Ellen, what advice would you give to cops that bottle it inside? I was there. Um, we're very insular, and we're out there solving problems. We're out there helping people in crisis. But when we're in crisis, we never want to admit it. We never want to seek help. But sometimes we need that help, and it gets to the point where it affects your family, it affects your job. What advice would you give to an officer that is very reluctant? And to that point you made, most psychiatrists or psychologists do not know how to speak to cops. Are there resources out there specific for mental health professionals that have a police background that could help cops? And then also, I know I'm throwing a lot out there, but just for anyone out there that's struggling to make that leap of faith to seek help, to help you personally and your family.
You're right. That was an awful lot of questions. So
Sorry.
Go to my website. I have a resource section, ellenkirschman.com, and there are several listings under the resource section of databases where you can search for what we call culturally competent clinicians. That means clinicians who understand what you do in the culture you work in. Go to a peer supporter. Hopefully you've got peer support in your organization. If you need help, go to the chaplain, but go to somebody, because bottling this stuff up inside is really going to kill you. And maybe not literally, but it will change your personality. It'll change your ability to relate to other people. It'll take the joy out of your life if you bottle things up. I mean, part of the problem with, I think, the culture of policing, and I attributed this to the fact that it's a male-dominated culture, and that ethos of being a man also spills over to the women that work there because they're trying to fit into the culture. It's really the idea that if you need help means you're weak. It actually means you're human. So on the one hand, I just want to say to folks, get over yourself. Come on. You are not perfect. No one can be perfect, and you are in a job in which it's impossible to be perfect. And this attempt to be perfect all the time is really a terrible burden to carry. That very often, I mean, find out who's around that you can talk to. Ask people that you know who may have had counseling. Who did they see? If you're afraid to go, take a buddy and to go with you, somebody else. But the longer you keep that stuff inside, the harder and harder it is to process it. We know that traumatic stress is an injury, like any other kind of injury. It can be healed. But the longer you hang on to it, the more encrusted it gets, the harder it is to work with it, and the more challenge you're presenting the therapist with. So, be nice to your therapist. Sort of don't wait so many years if you're having marital problems, if you're having nightmares, if you're checking the perimeter of your house 6 times a night, if you're drinking more than you used to drink. Have a little humility and a little compassion for yourself. You also, I mean, one of the things besides just that general kind of stigma that keeps cops from getting help is the fear of that they're going to lose confidentiality, or they're going to get, put on the rubber gun squad or something. All of that, it's so unlikely to happen. But check the laws in your state and see what are the rules of confidentiality.
Well, thank you, Ellen. I'm sure that's going to help a lot of my listeners out there consider seeking professional help if they haven't already. As you know, my nonprofit, Cop to Corporate, is to help police officers transition from the public sector to the private sector. And not all of them are retired. Many are mid career. Many have reached the tipping point where they just have to leave. So, what would be your advice if you were counseling someone and they were just at their wits' end from stress, from the job, and they maybe had 5, 10, 15 years in, they're not at pension age, but they just want to leave? What advice would you give them?
Well, first, let me say, Brian, that I think that what you're doing is brilliant. I used to say, I was making a joke, but partly I believe this as well, that if I wanted to really make an impact in the world of law enforcement, I would start an employment agency for police officers who wanted and needed to leave the job. We ask people to do this job way too long. Which should be much more like the military, where you can have options to get out, or sabbaticals, or things to just get some relief from the job. Nobody, by the way, listens to me about that because it's expensive to keep a turnover like that. But I think that where the officers need help the most is in translating what they do into corporate terms, or into the civilian world. So, I mean, too many officers have said to me, I can't do anything else. I don't know how to do anything else. I only know how to be a cop. Well, let's sit down and unpack that. What do you do? What do you know when you are a cop? So you've got great time management skills. You have the ability to plan ahead. You've done 10 ops plans in the last month, probably. You know how to make decisions. You have a public presence. You have most likely the ability to communicate. So to help them think about what they can do, and the talents they've developed, and the things they've learned, because police work is a great training ground in so many ways. The ability to analyze complex situations. I mean, police work is no longer a blue collar job, right? It's no longer just, hook 'em and book 'em. It's very complex. It requires analytical skills. So once an officer can identify what their talents are, that's one set of issues I think they need to work on. The other thing is the kind of fear of civilians. The idea that nobody else will understand me. I don't know how to talk to those people. They're all naive, that kind of we, they thing that officers frequently get into. So there has to be some work done on working with civilians, and there's a whole different norm about how civilians may act and how you have to talk to people and the patience that you need to have, and you can interrogate people, but you do have to ask questions and so forth and so on. And then I think that if anyone's carrying, and most cops are, some trauma that's unprocessed, that is keeping them from moving on. I mean, fear is what keeps people from moving on. And learning, so I think they have to have some psychological support if they have some, as one officer said, a duffel bag full of stuff that they haven't talked to anybody about. That has to be processed. And then to get over the idea, many cops are incredibly security minded. Money is everything. I will joke, because I can do this now with my gray hair, that some police officers I know have no hesitancy running into an empty building with the alarm bells going off, and they haven't got a clue who's in there and if that person is armed. But ask them to risk a dime, it won't happen. Tell them if the workers' comp is holding up their medical appointments, but they're in a lot of pain, to reach into their own pocket and pay for it. Not doing it, the work did it to me, then they're going to have to pay for it. That kind of really small-minded thinking. And then there's a lot of other things that you could organize with police officers, but there's certainly a sense of self-inflation, that civilians don't know anything and cops know everything. There's the idea that you become over time hypervigilant and highly suspicious of other people. That probably isn't going to go well in the corporate world. A cop say, if your lips are moving, you're lying. And that kind of over habituated street behavior, officers need to be aware of it in themselves, because you can't change something unless you're aware of it. So they probably would need some willingness to work on that too. It's a really brave thing to transition out of police work, because you're losing a lot. You're losing a lot of fraternity in some cases. You're losing a sense of power. You lose a whole bunch of perks that you get being a cop. But as you said, when a person is at this point in life where they cannot go any further, or it is so damaging to go further, it is really a courageous thing to say, I'm done. Now, I'm in the process of making several transitions. I transitioned from writing nonfiction. My nonfiction books sell very well, to writing fiction. My fiction books, which I really love and I think are good, they don't sell very well. But I couldn't do it again. My publisher wanted me to write yet another nonfiction book. And I was sort of up to here with doing all that research and the responsibility of having to get it right. I wanted to play, which is what writing fiction is much harder than writing nonfiction, but it's more fun and it's kind of therapeutic. So, because I get to do payback with a lot of people that maybe didn't treat me so well, a couple of my ex-husbands and a few other things. So, I mean, it does take courage. And that's why if you can give these folks, Brian, a helping hand, I think you're providing an incredibly valuable service, because we see suicide rate statistics go up in the statistics the longer people are on the job. And while some officers get wiser and better at the job after 15 or so years, some don't. And they just become, slugs. They don't want to do anything. Their morale, they break everybody's morale because they're bitter and unhappy. And people shouldn't be unhappy.
Ellen, thank you for your comments on Cop to Corporate. And I just want to note it's more than just me that is doing this. There's other cops out there that have transitioned successfully.
Okay.
And by finding others that have done it and getting that benchmarking and coaching and counseling and mentoring, people are making the transitions quicker and better. And so I want to compliment everyone out there that is doing it, helping others with resumes, talking about financial planning. But I also want to thank you again for being on Cop to Corporate, for all you do for policing. I wish you all the best with your fiction and nonfiction writing. And for those of you that have not subscribed on YouTube for Cop to Corporate, please click the subscribe button and connect with me on LinkedIn. Until then, thank you and have a great day.
Thank you for having me.